I remember clearly the first time I saw Mark. I was at my favorite cafe, a cozy little corner I often visited to escape the routine and lose myself in a good book. That afternoon, I was engrossed in a classic with a steaming cup of coffee in my hands when I noticed someone sit down beside me. Looking up, I found a pair of deep eyes and a warm smile. We exchanged glances, and in that brief moment, I felt an instant connection. Mark was charming, and somehow he had a presence that made everything around him seem brighter. Without much preamble, he asked about the book I was reading, and our conversation flowed surprisingly naturally. We talked about literature, music, and movies, and each word seemed to bring us closer. It was as if, without intending to, we had found someone who understood our passions and dreams. After an hour of uninterrupted conversation, he suggested we continue with a walk. We strolled around the city, laughing and sharing stories from our lives, as if we were old friends reuniting. Every step made my heart beat faster. I wasn't used to this kind of quick, deep connection, but with him, everything felt so natural. The afternoon flew by, and as we said goodbye, Mark asked for my number. With a mix of nerves and excitement, I agreed. From that moment, my life began to fill with unexpected messages and late-night calls. Mark's texts became the highlight of my day. It started with simple messages, checking in to ask how my day was or sharing a joke he knew would make me laugh. But soon our conversations grew deeper. We spoke about our dreams, fears, and even the scars we carried from past relationships. Bit by bit, Mark was becoming a part of my daily routine, a comforting presence I looked forward to. One evening, he invited me to dinner at a quaint restaurant in town. The atmosphere was perfect. Dim lighting, soft music, and a quiet corner just for us. Mark, with his effortless charm, made me feel as if I was the only person in the room. He listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and shared stories that revealed a vulnerability I hadn't expected. It was rare to find someone who didn't just hear you but truly listened, and with Mark, every moment felt meaningful. As dinner came to an end, we took a walk along the river nearby. The night air was cool, and the city lights reflected off the water, casting a soft glow around us. There, under the stars, he reached for my hand. My heart raced, but I didn't pull away. Holding his hand felt like the most natural thing in the world, like our lives had been leading to this very moment. From then on, our bond deepened. We spent weekends exploring new places together, laughing over silly things and savoring moments of quiet comfort. With every passing day, I grew more certain that meeting him hadn't been a coincidence. It felt like fate. Little did I know, beneath Mark's charming smile lay secrets that would soon unravel, turning my world upside down. As days passed, small cracks began to appear in Mark's seemingly perfect life. His stories didn't always add up, and there were odd gaps in his timeline. At first, I dismissed them, old habits from past relationships that left me overly cautious. But soon I couldn't ignore the creeping doubts. One night, as we were watching TV, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and for a moment his expression faltered. Guilt, maybe. When I casually asked, he brushed it off as a work message. But the late-night phone calls and urgent emails started piling up. His excuses, though harmless sounding, felt hollow. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. At dinner one evening, I asked, "What exactly do you do for work, Mark?" His response was vague, full of corporate jargon that didn't answer my question. I let it slide, but a pit formed in my stomach. The weekend brought more unease. He introduced me to a few friends, but their behavior raised my suspicions. They exchanged glances, made cryptic remarks, and Karen, a woman who seemed unusually interested in me, gave me a strange look that felt like pity. Later that night, Karen asked, "You really like him, don't you?" Before I could respond, Mark returned, and the conversation shifted. But the unease remained, gnawing at me. Something was off, and I had the feeling that if I dug deeper, I might not like what I found. The weight of my suspicions grew heavier with each passing day. I could no longer ignore the feeling that Mark was hiding something from me. The more I observed, the more his behavior seemed strange. Too many private conversations, too many moments of silence when I entered the room. His phone became an enigma, always face down, always just out of reach. One evening, I made up my mind. I waited until he was in the shower and then grabbed his phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it with the code he'd carelessly forgotten to change. Scrolling through his messages, I found a trail of conversations that chilled me to my core. There were texts between him and a woman named Lucy, a name he had never mentioned before. The words were flirtatious, intimate, even suggestive. My heart sank as I read more. He had been seeing her for months. I wanted to confront him right then, but the shock left me paralyzed. I needed time to process, to understand how deep this betrayal ran. I couldn't believe it. Mark, the man I had trusted, had lied to me all along. That night, I stayed awake, replaying the moments we'd shared. The man I thought I knew seemed to be a stranger now. The anger bubbled up, but so did the questions. Why had he done this? What did Lucy mean to him? And most importantly, what did I mean to him? As dawn broke, I knew what I had to do. The time for confrontation was coming, and I wouldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't keep the truth buried any longer. The weight of what I had discovered was suffocating. Mark's betrayal loomed over me like a storm I couldn't escape. I had planned every word in my head, but nothing could prepare me for the moment I finally faced him. That evening, as he walked in the door, I was ready. He was still smiling, still the man who thought everything was normal. But I wasn't the same. I stood in the living room, holding his phone in my hand, my pulse racing. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, though my insides were trembling. He looked confused, then concerned. "What's going on?" He set down his briefcase, but his eyes kept darting to the phone I held. I held it out. "Who's Lucy?" His face drained of color, and for a split second, I saw panic in his eyes. I can explain," he stammered. Didn't give him the chance to finish. "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me. That you've been seeing her behind my back for months." My voice cracked as the anger and hurt flooded out. Mark's face fell, and he took a step toward me, but I backed away. "How could you do this to me?" I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it away. "I thought I knew you, Mark, but now I don't even know who you are." The silence between us was deafening. The man I loved stood there, guilty and broken, while I wondered if I would ever be able to trust him again. The days that followed the confrontation were a blur of arguments and cold silences. Mark begged for forgiveness, promising it was a mistake, that Lucy meant nothing to him, but every word out of his mouth felt like a lie. My trust in him shattered, and no matter how hard he tried to piece it back together, the cracks were too deep. I found myself staring at our wedding photos, wondering how I could have been so blind. Every memory, every moment we'd shared, felt tainted now. I'd given him my heart, my future, and he had thrown it all away for a few stolen moments of deceit. His presence became suffocating. I couldn't stand to be near him, to look at him, knowing what he had done. Yet I couldn't bring myself to leave. I wasn't sure if it was because I still loved him or because I feared being alone. I spent my days in a haze of confusion, torn between the man I had married and the stranger who had betrayed me. One evening I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when I felt a presence beside me. Mark sat down carefully, his eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away sharply. "Stop," I said, my voice tight. "Just stop pretending. I can't do this anymore." His face contorted in pain, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. "Please, Emma, I love you. I swear it was a mistake. I've been an idiot, but we can fix this, together." I shook my head, tears welling up in my eyes. "No, Mark. You've broken me. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when I know it's not. I don't even know who you are anymore." I stood up, walking toward the door, my chest heavy with the weight of everything I had to say. "I'm leaving. I need space. I need to find myself again. I can't keep living like this. Mark didn't stop me. He didn't even move. He just watched as I grabbed my keys and left, the door clicking shut behind me. The finality of it hit me like a wave. There was no going back. The days after I left Mark felt like a whirlwind. I stayed with my sister for a few weeks, trying to escape the suffocating reality of the life I had walked away from. Each day I questioned my decision. Was I being too harsh? Should I have given him another chance? But deep down, I knew that the man I had married no longer existed. He was a stranger, one who had shattered everything we had built together. Mark called constantly, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up. The guilt of leaving him behind weighed on me, but the anger and betrayal I felt pushed those feelings aside. Every time I thought about him, I remembered the night of the party, his words, his actions. The way he had looked at Lucy as if she was the one who truly mattered. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend like nothing had changed. One afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Mark. This time I hesitated. My heart beat louder in my chest, and I wondered if this time, things would be different. If he would finally understand the depth of the pain he caused. I picked up. "Emma, please," Mark's voice was thick with desperation. "Please talk to me. I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake, and I've been living in hell without you. I'll do anything to make things right." I felt a surge of emotions, anger, sadness, regret, all swirling inside me. My voice shook when I finally responded. "Mark, you don't get it. It's not about just saying sorry and expecting everything to go back to normal. You broke my trust, and that's something you can't just fix with words." I know, he replied quickly. "But I'll prove to you that I can change. I'll do whatever it takes." "You don't get it, Mark," I said, my words cutting through the silence. "I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me. You're asking me to forgive you. But I don't know if I can. I don't even know who I am anymore, let alone who you are. How can we rebuild something when it feels like everything's been destroyed?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear his breathing, steady but strained. "I don't know what else to say, Emma. I don't want to lose you." I could hear the rawness in his voice, but it didn't change the fact that I was done. I was exhausted from the lies, the deceit, the hurt. I had spent so long trying to make him happy, trying to make us work, but now I had to focus on myself. I had to heal. "I'm sorry, Mark," I whispered. "But I can't come back. I need to be on my own. I need to figure out who I am without you." I hung up before he could respond. The finality of it hit me hard, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, yet the emptiness remained. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, trying to steady my breath. Was this what freedom felt like? The next few weeks were a blur. I kept to myself, trying to rebuild my life piece by piece. I found a small apartment, something cozy and just for me. I painted the walls a soft shade of blue, filled it with plants, and created a space that was completely my own. It felt good, like I was reclaiming parts of myself I had lost along the way. Mark kept trying to contact me, sending messages, calling, even showing up at my apartment unannounced. But I stood my ground. I knew this was what I needed, even if it hurt. I had to stand up for myself, for my own peace. He had to understand that I was no longer the woman he had married. I wasn't going to be anyone's second choice. One evening, as I was sitting on my couch, sipping a cup of tea and reading a book, I received another message from Mark. His words were simple. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness." For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness. I had loved him once, and part of me still wished things could have been different. But the truth was, I wasn't the same person anymore. I'd learned to value myself, to respect my own worth, and no apology could undo the damage that had been done. I put my phone down and went back to my book, the weight in my chest lighter than it had been in months. The silence in my apartment was no longer uncomfortable. It was mine. I was free. Time passed, and each day brought more clarity. I was becoming someone new, someone I hadn't recognized at first, but who I was finally starting to understand. The pain from the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak. It still lingered, but I was learning to live with it. Process wasn't quick or easy, but with each passing day, I felt stronger. My relationship with Mark seemed like a distant memory, like a life that belonged to someone else. I spent time with people who truly cared about me, friends who had been there all along, even when I couldn't see it. They offered me support, but never asked for anything in return. Slowly, I began to trust again. Not just them, but myself. One evening, while I was having dinner with my best friend Claire, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw that it was from my mom. She rarely contacted me, especially after I had walked away from my marriage. She had always been so tied to Mark and his family, more concerned with appearances than with me. This time I decided to pick up. "Hey, Mom," I answered, trying to sound casual. Emma, her voice was cautious but softer than I remembered. "I've been thinking about everything, and I want to apologize for not supporting you more. I was wrong about Mark, and I can see now that you made the right choice." I blinked, stunned. For years I had longed for her approval, for her to see me the way I had hoped, but this was different, unexpected. I didn't know how to respond at first. "Mom," I said quietly, "thank you, but I don't need anyone to apologize for me. I've learned that I'm the only one who can make the right choices for my life." Her voice faltered, but she was persistent. "I know, and I want you to know that I'll be here for you. I was wrong not to see that earlier." There was a long pause. My mind swirled with mixed emotions. I had been so angry at her for all these years, but hearing her admit her mistake, even after all this time, was a moment of healing I hadn't anticipated. We both needed this. It wasn't going to fix everything, but it was a step forward. "I appreciate that, Mom," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I'm still figuring things out, but I'm getting there. I just need some time." "I understand," she replied. "Take all the time you need. Just know I'm here when you're ready." After hanging up, I sat in silence, reflecting on everything. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. The world seemed a little clearer, a little lighter. This wasn't the resolution I had expected. There were still pieces of my past I needed to mend, but I had taken the first step toward moving forward, both with my mother and with my own heart. The next few months flew by. I became more involved with my work, focusing on my passions and rediscovering the person I had once been before Mark entered my life. I traveled with Claire, spent weekends volunteering at local shelters, and reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during my marriage. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly living. Not for anyone else, but for me. Then one day, when I least expected it, I saw him. Mark was standing across the street from my office, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his face worn and tired. I hadn't seen him in almost a year, and yet the sight of him stirred something inside me, something I hadn't felt in so long. It was strange, this mix of relief and sadness, as if we were both haunted by the ghosts of what could have been. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do, but then as quickly as it had come, the feeling faded. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the woman whom had clung to hope, waiting for him to change. I wasn't the woman whom had let herself be silenced by guilt and shame. I had grown. I had learned to live without him. Mark caught sight of me, and his face softened. He took a step forward, but I shook my head, gently but firmly. "No, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not the person you remember. I'm not going back." He stopped in his tracks, his shoulders sagging. There was a sadness in his eyes that mirrored my own, but there was no turning back now. I had to be honest with myself and with him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. I nodded, my chest tight. "I know you are. But this is where it ends. I've already let go." Mark didn't say anything else. He simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. And in that moment I realized something. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about rekindling the past. It was about moving forward, about closing a chapter of my life that had been painful, but necessary. I didn't need his validation anymore. I didn't need his approval. I'd only needed my own. As I watched him disappear, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I was done. And that was enough. I had survived, I had moved on. And in the end, that was all that mattered.